of song. And as a matter of fact, about a week after I did that on your show
Right.
here, we did a concert at Blossom Music Center in Cleveland, Ohio.
On October 12th, 1997, the world was stunned and shaken. John Denver, the legendary country music icon, the golden voice of Take Me Home, Country Roads, tragically lost his life in a plane crash. The man who once sang of blue skies, freedom, and the desire to soar high was ironically brought down by fate in the very skies he loved so passionately. For years, the official investigation reports revealed only part of the truth, leaving behind countless unanswered questions that haunted fans. Was it a sudden accident, or were there hidden secrets? Why would an experienced pilot like John face a fatal incident seemingly too simple to believe? And could the undisclosed details completely reshape the way we perceive his death? Today, we will guide you through each layer of this enigmatic tragedy, from technical records and eyewitness accounts to the most shocking theories. Brace yourself, because the final answers are far from comforting, and may even send chills down your spine. Before the world came to know him as John Denver, the golden-voiced troubadour whose melodies painted pictures of open skies, winding rivers, and the boundless American West, he was simply Henry John Deutschendorf Jr., a boy navigating a childhood marked by hardship, loneliness, and the search for belonging. His story, though often overshadowed by the glitter of his later fame, is one of resilience and the quiet strength born from pain. Born in 1943 in Roswell, New Mexico, Denver's earliest years were defined less by the stability of home and more by the constant motion of military life. His father, Henry John Deutschendorf Sr., was a decorated United States Air Force pilot. To the outside world, he was a figure of discipline, honor, and authority. But to young John, he was an almost unreachable presence, stern, emotionally distant, and frequently absent due to his demanding career. In those rare moments when he was home, the atmosphere was anything but tender. The weight of strict expectations pressed heavily on the young boy, who longed not for medals or military precision, but for the warmth of affection and acceptance. This yearning for connection often left Denver feeling like a misfit within his own family. While his peers might have enjoyed the comfort of stable neighborhoods and enduring friendships, Denver's world was in perpetual flux. Military assignments meant relocations were a way of life, uprooting him time and again just as he began to settle into new communities. Each move reinforced a sense of isolation, as if he were forever an outsider peering through the window of belonging. The result was a childhood colored by transience, silence, and the constant search for a place to call home. Yet, amid the turbulence, there was one enduring light: music. It entered his life not through his father's regimented order, but through the gentle, unassuming love of his grandmother. She gave him his very first guitar, a gift that would prove to be far more than just wood and strings. To young John, that instrument was an escape hatch from a world that felt stifling, a confidant to whom he could whisper his deepest feelings, and a compass guiding him toward a destiny he could scarcely imagine. From the moment his fingers began to trace chords, Denver found solace in sound. The guitar became his sanctuary, a space where the harshness of military expectations and the sting of loneliness could be softened, transformed into something beautiful. The music he coaxed from those strings wasn't just melody. It was catharsis. Every note was a small act of rebellion against silence, every lyric an attempt to give voice to emotions he had long been forced to suppress. As he grew, so too did his devotion to this newfound companion. Music wasn't simply a pastime, it was survival. For Denver, strumming the guitar was not about ambition or applause. It was about carving out a place where he could truly exist, where his emotions could stretch their wings free from judgment. In a household ruled by rigidity, music offered freedom. In a boyhood plagued by disconnection, it offered intimacy. And in a life defined by impermanence, it offered permanence. It was during these formative years that Denver began to dream. Dreams not of medals or military stripes, but of open highways, concert halls, and the kind of connection that only music could deliver. His songs, long before they reached radio waves, were messages to himself. Reminders that even in the bleakest moments, beauty could be found, and a voice, even one that felt small, could rise above the noise. If John Denver's childhood had been a canvas of muted grays, his early adult years were the first brushstrokes of color, tentative yet full of promise. Having found in music both refuge and identity, Denver carried his guitar not just as an instrument, but as an extension of his very soul. In the beginning, his stages were modest, dimly lit bars, smoky clubs, and coffee houses buzzing with the restless energy of America in the 1960s. Yet even in those humble venues, there was something magnetic about him. Audiences who stumbled upon his performances often described the same thing: a voice that seemed to cut through noise and distraction, a sound at once simple and transcendent. Unlike the gritty rock anthems of the era, Denver's music radiated purity. His songs were laced with an affection for nature, a yearning for freedom, and an honesty that felt almost disarming. Where others sought to dazzle with spectacle, Denver won hearts by being utterly, unapologetically genuine. Still, the road to recognition was not paved in gold. Denver knew rejection well. Record labels dismissed him as too wholesome, too soft for a market saturated with rebellion. At times, he wondered if the industry's doors would ever truly open for someone like him. But his resilience, forged in the furnace of childhood struggles, refused to let him quit. He kept writing, kept performing, pouring his spirit into every lyric as though each song might be his last chance to reach someone who needed it. And then, in 1971, the tide turned. A song, gentle yet powerful, burst forth like a river breaking its dam. Take Me Home, Country Roads. The track was more than just a melody. It was a collective heartbeat. It evoked not merely the physical landscapes of West Virginia, but the deeper, universal longing for home, belonging, and roots. When Denver's warm tenor carried those words across the airwaves, America listened. For many, it was as if he had given voice to their own quiet yearning, articulating emotions they had never quite been able to name. The song climbed the charts, but more importantly, it climbed into the national consciousness. From bustling cities to remote farmhouses, Country Roads became an anthem. People sang it not only because they liked it, but because they felt it. Suddenly, Denver wasn't just another singer-songwriter. He was a storyteller whose words echoed the soul of a generation. The hits came steadily after that breakthrough. Rocky Mountain High painted landscapes as vast and breathtaking as the Colorado wilderness itself. Annie's Song, a tender ode to his then-wife, wrapped listeners in the intimacy of love's embrace. Each release seemed to reveal another layer of Denver's heart, as though he were inviting the world not just to listen, but to live alongside him. His concerts filled arenas, yet the atmosphere he created was strangely intimate, as though every audience member had been personally welcomed into his living room. Yet beneath the applause, the story of John Denver remained one of contrasts. Fame did not erase the insecurities of his youth, nor did it eliminate the shadows of loneliness. If anything, the spotlight sometimes intensified them. There were nights, even at the height of his career, when he would retreat backstage, guitar still in hand, and wonder whether the man adored by millions was the same boy who had once felt invisible in his own family. The truth was complicated, but it was precisely this complexity that made his art resonate. He was not perfect, not invincible, but profoundly human. There are anecdotes, half-whispered among friends, that on certain nights before big performances, Denver would walk alone under the stars, drawing strength from the natural world that had always been his muse. He would close his eyes and imagine the mountains, the rivers, the quiet forests, and remind himself that while fame was fleeting, the earth's beauty was eternal. Perhaps this ritual was what kept him grounded, what allowed him to stand before thousands and still sing with the sincerity of a man playing only for himself. By the mid-1970s, John Denver had become more than a musician. He was a symbol. His music carried optimism, a gentle defiance against cynicism, and a reminder that joy could be found in simplicity. At a time when America was grappling with political upheaval, cultural shifts, and lingering scars from war, Denver's voice was a balm. He reminded listeners that, despite the chaos of the world, there remained spaces of peace, spaces that could be accessed through nature, through love and through song. The boy who once longed for warmth in a cold household had become the embodiment of warmth itself. His melodies were campfires in the dark, his lyrics lanterns that lit the path toward hope. It is tempting to frame his success merely as triumph over adversity, but it was more than that. John Denver did not simply escape his painful beginnings, he transmuted them. He transformed loneliness into songs of connection, longing into anthems of belonging, and personal wounds into universal healing. In this way, Denver's rise to fame was not just about climbing charts or selling records. It was about giving the world something it desperately needed: sincerity. And that sincerity, born from the crucible of a difficult childhood, became his greatest gift. By the end of the 1970s, John Denver was not only a household name, but a cultural touchstone. His songs had crossed oceans, translated into languages his younger self could never have imagined. But for all the accolades, one truth remained. Behind every lyric and every chord was the boy with his grandmother's guitar, still strumming, still searching, still believing in the power of music to heal both himself and the world. By the late 1980s and early 1990s, John Denver had already secured his place in the pantheon of American music. His voice had become a cultural landmark, his songs woven into the very fabric of people's lives, played at weddings, whispered in moments of solitude, and sung along highways stretching endlessly across the American landscape. Yet even as he continued to perform and inspire, Denver was a man increasingly drawn toward another lifelong passion: flying. The son of an Air Force pilot, aviation was in his blood. Though his relationship with his father had been strained, the skies represented both inheritance and redemption. Piloting small aircraft offered him a sense of freedom akin to the serenity he found in the mountains of Colorado. Up there, soaring above the clouds, Denver felt an intimacy with the universe, as though each flight brought him closer to the essence of the freedom he so often sang about. He once confided to friends that flying was like singing with his whole body, a dance between man and machine, earth and sky. But as his love for aviation deepened, so too did the risks. Denver was known for experimenting with different types of aircraft, fascinated by innovation and engineering. In the months leading up to that fateful autumn day, he had reportedly been captivated by the sleek design of the Rutan Long-EZ, a home-built experimental aircraft known for its efficiency and futuristic shape. For Denver, the plane wasn't just a machine. It was an extension of his adventurous spirit, a vessel through which he could touch the edge of infinity. October 12th, 1997, was a day bathed in the kind of California light that might have inspired one of his songs. The coastline shimmered under a sky painted in gold, and Denver, ever the dreamer, saw it as a perfect day to fly. He climbed into the cockpit of the Long-EZ, the tail number N555JD, bearing his initials, standing as a silent signature of ownership and pride. Witnesses would later recall how calm he appeared before takeoff, as though this flight were no different from hundreds before it. Perhaps in those quiet moments before lifting off, he hummed a tune to himself, a private ritual of reassurance. The flight began smoothly. Denver performed a series of touch-and-go landings at the Monterey Peninsula Airport, a routine maneuver for pilots honing their skills. But fate, indifferent to talent or legacy, waits in the smallest of details. The Long-EZ had an unusual configuration. Its fuel selector valve was positioned awkwardly behind the pilot's left shoulder, making it difficult to access in flight. Investigators would later conclude that when Denver attempted to switch fuel tanks midair, he may have lost control of the aircraft. At approximately 5:30 p.m., the plane veered unexpectedly, dipping sharply before plunging into the cold waters of Monterey Bay. Onlookers, stunned and helpless, watched as the wreck disappeared beneath the waves. Rescue teams rushed to the scene, but there was no miracle waiting to unfold. John Denver, the man whose voice had carried millions of listeners to places of beauty and hope, was gone. He was only 53 years old. The official cause of death was blunt force trauma from the impact. Yet to his fans and to the world, the cause seemed irrelevant. What mattered was the sudden, irreparable silence left in the wake of his passing. News of the crash spread quickly, rippling across time zones and continents. Radios, which had once carried his voice to every corner of the globe, now bore somber reports of his death. For many, it felt as though a piece of their own past had been torn away. In the days that followed, makeshift memorials bloomed like wildflowers. Fans gathered outside concert halls where he had once performed, leaving guitars, handwritten notes, and lyrics scrawled on scraps of paper. In Aspen, Colorado, his beloved home in the Rockies, candles flickered against the night sky as mourners sang his songs together, their voices blending into a chorus of grief and gratitude. It was as if the very mountains he had immortalized in Rocky Mountain High were now echoing his farewell. Friends and colleagues painted a portrait of a man whose spirit remained unbroken even amid life's complexities. Some recalled his generosity, his tireless activism for the environment, his advocacy for space exploration, and his insistence that humanity could live in harmony with nature. Others remembered his laughter, his easy charm, and the way he could make a crowded room feel like an intimate circle of friends. The tragedy of his death was not only the loss of an artist, but of a human being who had dedicated his life to building bridges between people, between cultures, and between humanity and the earth itself. Speculation and what-ifs swirled in the aftermath. What if Denver had chosen a different aircraft that day? What if the design flaw had been corrected? What if fate had given him one more chance to sing, to write, to inspire? But history does not deal in hypotheticals. It offers only the truth of what was. And the truth was that John Denver's journey ended in the skies he so dearly loved. For years after John Denver's death, the official explanation was accepted by the public with a heavy heart, but little question. A tragic accident, a brilliant life extinguished by the cruel hand of fate. Fans mourned, the world moved on, and Denver's music continued to echo across the decades as though nothing could tarnish its purity. Yet, as time passed, layers of the story began to peel away. What had once seemed like a simple mishap in the skies over Monterey Bay revealed itself to be a far more unsettling narrative. The National Transportation Safety Board, NTSB, issued its findings soon after the crash, citing the awkwardly placed fuel selector valve as a critical factor. Positioned behind the pilot's shoulder, the valve was nearly impossible to adjust without contorting the body. A dangerous flaw, especially in a small, lightweight aircraft. The board concluded that Denver had likely attempted to switch fuel tanks mid-flight, losing control in the process. At first, the explanation seemed clear, yet whispers persisted among aviation experts and Denver's close friends. Why, they asked, had such a seasoned pilot, someone with hundreds of hours of flight time, failed to anticipate the risks of the long EZ? Why had he continued flying an aircraft whose design quirks were widely known? And why, despite his earlier complaints about fuel system malfunctions, had no meaningful changes been made? As investigators dug deeper, an uncomfortable truth emerged. The Rutan Long EZ, while admired for its innovation, carried inherent design compromises that made it unsuitable for less experienced pilots. Safety modifications had been recommended but never enforced. In fact, Denver himself had allegedly raised concerns about the fuel valve during casual conversations with fellow pilots. He joked once that, "It's easier to play guitar behind your back than to reach that switch midair." The humor barely masked a growing unease, a premonition, perhaps, that went unheeded. Technical flaws, however, told only part of the story. Beneath the mechanical details lay the weight of Denver's personal struggles. In the years leading up to the accident, his private life had been marked by turbulence. His marriages had ended in heartbreak, leaving him grappling with loneliness even as audiences continued to adore him. His career, though still respected, no longer dominated the charts as it once had during the 1970s. Critics questioned his relevance in a changing musical landscape, and Denver, ever sensitive, ever searching, felt the sting. Friends later admitted that he carried these burdens quietly, rarely letting the public see the cracks. Yet there were moments, they recalled, when his eyes betrayed exhaustion, when his laughter carried the weight of effort rather than joy. Some speculated that his psychological state, though not impaired by substances, tests confirmed he was sober that day, might still have affected his decision-making in the cockpit. Fatigue, distraction, and the invisible fog of emotional turmoil can be as dangerous to a pilot as faulty machinery. The picture that emerged was chilling in its irony, a convergence of human vulnerability, technical negligence, and cruel circumstance. Denver's death was not the random accident many had first believed. It was, instead, the result of a chain of preventable factors, each one small on its own but catastrophic when combined. A poorly placed valve, a history of ignored warnings, a man under quiet personal strain. Together, these fragments formed a mosaic of tragedy that no single explanation could fully capture. Speculation fueled further theories. Some wondered if Denver, who often pushed himself toward risk, whether in flying or in confronting personal demons, had underestimated the dangers that day, convinced his optimism could carry him through. Others pointed to the symbolic resonance of it all. The singer who had given the world wings through music losing his own life in the skies he loved most. Was it fate, coincidence, or a tragic inevitability born of choices and flaws long in the making? The revelations did little to comfort fans. In fact, they deepened the grief. To know that his death was not merely a cruel accident, but one shaped by human error, systemic neglect, and personal pain was almost unbearable. It stripped away the illusion of randomness and replaced it with the ache of what could have been. If the valve had been redesigned, if the fuel issue had been fixed, if someone had intervened during his darker moments. If. Always. If. And yet within this discomfort lay a stark reminder of John Denver's humanity. He was not a mythic figure immune to the flaws of the world. He was a man, vulnerable and imperfect, navigating the same struggles that millions quietly face. His brilliance coexisted with fragility. His soaring voice was born from a heart that knew both light and shadow. Perhaps that is why his legacy endures so powerfully. Knowing the painful truth of his final moments does not diminish the beauty of his songs. It amplifies them. Each lyric now carries the weight of a life lived on the edge of joy and sorrow, a life that sought freedom but never fully escaped its chains. In the end, the mystery was resolved, but not in the way anyone wished. The answers were not soothing. They were unsettling, sobering, and profoundly human. John Denver's final flight was not just a mechanical failure, nor solely a personal misstep, but a mirror reflecting the precarious balance between dream and danger, between man and machine, between the heavens we long to touch and the earth that inevitably claims us back. John Denver is gone, but his music is immortal. He left behind songs about nature, love, and hope, songs that will live on in the hearts of generations. John Denver's death is not only a loss for music, but also a reminder of the fragility of human life, of the dangers that always lurk in life. If you love John Denver, leave a comment sharing the song you remember most, or the memories that his music has associated with you. Don't forget to like and subscribe so we can continue to bring you touching stories behind the halo of the stars. John Denver, a legend who passed away in tragedy, but the light from his music will never be extinguished.